The state is committed to paying 100% of the debt service related to the Star C bonds, and that's going forward. And when the bonds were refinanced, there were savings. And also I want to point out state taxpayers will pay 100% of the $4.8 billion for the city's MAC bonds. And state taxpayers deserve every dollar of the savings. This should be obvious. It's like if your uncle pays the mortgage on your house when you refinance your house, who deserves the savings. I do want to go back though, because we talked about you have nearly $5 billion in reserves, including $3.4 billion in retiree health benefits trust, $1 billion annually in your general reserve, which is an historically high level, $500 million in new capital stabilization reserve. You're benefiting from not having the property tax cap. You have upwards of $2.5 billion in potential additional revenues for the city's upcoming budget. So you're in a very, very good spot. But I did want to point out with your spending, because you are outpacing the state's fiscal restraint. As you know, we are under a voluntary 2% spending cap through the state budget. And however, the city's expenditures have increased at an average annual rate of more than 6%. And from 2011 to 16, city-funded expenditures adjusted for surplus transfers have grown at an average annual rate of 6.33%, as a matter of fact. And you compare that to the state spending of less than 2%. So you're in a great spot financially because you have all these surplus dollars, you're increasing spending over 6%. And again, I wanted to ask, because I asked it previously, I'm not sure I got the answer to it, but are you looking at your spending? Are you doing anything with the program to eliminate the gap called the PEG program with your city agencies to try to restrain some of the spending and find some savings for the taxpayers of New York City?
Okay, Senator, let me go over several points that you raised, if I may. First, on that point, Mr. Houlihan can outline the details. We had over $1 billion of savings that we identified in our preliminary budget proposal. We also have said very clearly we are looking seriously at a specific PEG strategy for the executive budget proposal in May, but not a minor matter that we found $1 billion in savings already. Second, some of the growth, a substantial amount of the growth in the budget is related to Hurricane Sandy matters, meaning we are passing through federal dollars from FEMA, from HUD, for Hurricane Sandy relief efforts. That is a temporary condition. When those federal dollars drop up, we anticipate that our budget will actually contract. We also, as you heard earlier, have brand new obligations that came on very suddenly that we are, by law, must abide by, obviously in the case of the city actuary, adding a $600 million charge for this year and every year thereafter. We have an immediate challenge related to health and hospitals. So that budgetary growth is in large measure because of federal funds that are short-term and because of new obligations that we have no choice but to meet. On your other questions, or the other points you made, on the way our tax system is oriented in the city, obviously one of the few places in the state with a personal income tax at the city level. I would say my colleagues here from the city would agree that our property tax rate plus our city income tax is certainly substantial for our taxpayers to have to handle. Finally, on the question of the $600 million on the MAC refinancing, this issue, we believe fundamentally, was settled in 2004 by the New York State Court of Appeals, which made clear that the state had an obligation through 2034, I believe it was, to continue a regular payment of $170 million per year to the city of New York. It was an agreement struck between the two levels of government. It was confirmed by the Court of Appeals. So we believe that has to be honored for the long term.
Thank you, Mayor, for those answers. You know, the bottom line is that the city is awash in money right now, and localities around the state, counties, cities, small cities, villages, towns, would only dream of having surpluses and have to live under the property tax cap. So I want to thank you for your answers, and
I'm sorry, Senator, could we just do a quick response to that last point, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
I just want to quickly add, the mayor talked about over $1 billion in the preliminary budget, with more savings to be found in the executive budget, and last year we did over $1.4 billion also in savings. PEG really is a plan to eliminate the gap, which the city has, and it's worth noting that in 18 we are projecting a $2.2 billion gap, and in 19 a $2.9 billion gap, and in 20 a $2.7 billion gap.
Thank you very
So
much.
we also, and the prepayments happens to be under the accounting methods that the city uses, that's how we actually balanced, and those prepayments you talked about are exactly how we proposed in the preliminary budget a balanced budget for fiscal 17.
And finally, the Medicaid challenges that you raise. Let's be clear, our situation with our Health and Hospitals Corporation is only going to get more difficult because of larger things happening in federal and state policy. We would very much like to work with the state and join with the state in going to Washington for some of the fundamental changes we'll need. But in the meantime, the financial impact on the city will grow intensely. And again, we don't have a safety net to turn to. We will simply have to take on those costs. So I would just suggest that that's another challenge that will grow for us.
Thank you, Mayor.